Hello everybody, my name is Dalton Nelson and today I'd like to talk about a year of games that I have just played through. And that year being 2018. 2018 was generally a positive year for games for me. I played a lot of great games this year and I want to talk about them here on this 2018 top games list. Now if you're not up to speed on the list of games that I have played this year, I will include a visual of the list here in the video. It will be scrolling down now. You'll be seeing it. All right, cool. And so, a couple of things I would like to get out of the way first before we go into the list. First thing is that this list is not based off of the scores that I have given each game. If I were to structure this list based off of the scores that I have given the games, then I would have not made this video anyway. I would have just left the list up on Instagram, and you guys would have known what my top game of the year would have been. Second of all, this is my list. All of the lists here, all of the entries here are subjectively what I think where they should be. So there will be some placements here that don't quite fit with the scores that I gave them, and I'll give a reason why as we go through the list on why I think this is here or that is there. And the third and final thing I would like to get out of the way on the list is that these are all games that I have played in 2018 that I have never played before. This is not a list of the top games from 2018. So if there's any confusion there, just know that these are games that I have never played before that I am ranking, not games from 2018. And with out of the way, I got the list right here. So before we get to the list, I would like to mention some honorable mentions that didn't quite make it onto the list for one reason or another. The first being the Deltarune demo released by Toby Fox in October of this year. Because it is a demo, it didn't make it onto the list. However, I would recommend you pick it up. It's free, and it's kind of like Undertale, so if you're looking for more Undertale than what was just delivered within the base game, then this is kind of like, Deltarune is kind of like Undertale, but with a few things changed and added. The other two games I would like to give an honorable shout out to is Turok Dinosaur Hunter and Turok 2 Seeds of Evil, but not the original releases back in the 1990s. I want to give a shout out to the Night Dive remakes that came out last year and this year. They're both really great and get rid of some problems that I didn't really like within the original releases, such as level design issues and frame rate issues. They didn't make it onto the list because I am nostalgically biased for these games. I have played these games in my childhood and I really love these games. I have a lot of memories around these, so they didn't quite make it onto the list. However, if you are looking for games that I have recommended and that I normally recommend, then I definitely recommend these. And with that out of the way, let's go on to the top games that I have played in 2018. Let's go! To start off the bottom 6 games of the games I have played in 2018, this one was the worst, and that is number 36, Infamous Second Son. One of the most boring and uninspired games that I have played all year. It really isn't worth the time or the trouble to go through this very repetitive and bland experience. At number 35, it is Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver. This game by Crystal Dynamics came out a while ago, and I had picked up this game based off of a friend's recommendation, and I am very saddened to say that I did not enjoy this game that much. Of course, I do blame it on the port job that Eidos, one of the Eidos companies, did for this game. There's a lot of sound issues and frame rate issues on the PC port, so that definitely contributed to my experience, but there are also various level design issues, and the game is very derivative of Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. At number 34, I put Mega Man 3, one of the most frustrating Mega Man games I've played thus far. It really doesn't live up to that reputation it has as one of the greatest Mega Man games. I thought that a lot of the design choices were very annoying, and that the game's difficulty wasn't really brought upon what the designers had brought to the table here, but rather ignoring the things that made the predecessor to this game, Mega Man 2, so great. At number 33, I put Deus Ex: Mankind Divided, also a very boring and bland game. The stealth portions of this game could easily be conquered just by going into a vent and hiding from enemy AI as they walk around aimlessly trying to find you. It's not exactly a hard game, but it is a confusing game, especially with how the story is structured and the ending that just kind of ends really quickly. It's not as quality as the graphical fidelity likes to make you think that it is. At number 32 on this list, I put Kirby Star Allies, easily one of the most disappointing games of this year for me. Everything seems so uninspired and bland. This is easily one of the most uncreative Kirby games released thus far. The Allies system isn't even much of a gimmick. It's more like cutscenes being played right before your eyes. I wouldn't really recommend this Kirby game, which is a shame, because I was really looking forward to what the team at HAL would do within the next generation and the technology that is provided on the Switch. However, they did not do so, and instead released Kirby Star Allies, one of the most bland Kirby games in the franchise. Topping off the bottom 6 is Marbly, released on iOS. This game is marketed as being made by Tetris creator Alexei Pajitnov. However, after some research, I found that wasn't really the case, and instead the concept came from Pajitnov instead. And what comes out of this concept is a really bland match 3 puzzler with a lot of microtransactions and a lot of waiting. There are some creative puzzles within the game, but it doesn't really justify that much enjoyability. Now on to the top 30 games. Number 30 is LEGO Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Every time I go to play one of these games, I always think it's not that bad, that I think that I usually have fun with these, and then I start playing it and it starts getting boring and repetitive like they normally do. And then after a couple of months, I think, it wasn't actually that bad, and I would enjoy playing another one, and the cycle continues and continues, and each year I play a new LEGO game like that. And I think that's why LEGO Star Wars Force Awakens is so high on this list, is because I don't think it was that bad. It's not as bad as, well, there aren't really that many bad LEGO Traveler Tales games. They're just kind of the same all across the board. But one thing that was a little bit different is that they censor violence in this game, and they seem to have made the plot of the actual Star Wars The Force Awakens movie seem more incomprehensible than what it actually is. At number 29 on this list is Forsaken 64, created by Probe Entertainment. I was looking forward to the free-range shooting that was the selling point of this game. However, the blurry graphics and the ho-hum gameplay overall kind of left me unsatisfied. However, there was that funny thing with like the Pure Bitch Power theme song thing and Nut being the final boss's name. So at least that's something. At number 28 on this list is Bound. Bound is very derivative of the game Journey. However, I did kind of like the style that Bound presented, as well as the soundtrack. The story can be a bit confusing and hard to grasp, but I think Bound has some unique aspects to it, but I think it needs more in the platforming department. And number 27 on the list is Mega Man 4. Mega Man 4 was, I think I described it as the amalgamation, what did I describe it as? Oh yeah, the worst amalgamation of good ideas I've ever seen. I think a lot of the creative ideas on Mega Man 4 is interesting, and they definitely carried over that kind of design technique over to Mega Man 5. However, I also think that Mega Man 4 has some very frustrating aspects to it as well. Some carried over from 3. So I think that if you want to see some interesting ideas and some really weird execution, then I think Mega Man 4 is for you. And number 26 on this list is Uncharted 4, A Thief's End. Uncharted 4 has a lot of cliches to it. If you've ever seen a movie within the action or adventure genre, then you pretty much know what you can expect from Uncharted 4. I'm very much in the same boat in terms of graphical fidelity and set-piece design that Uncharted 4 introduces within its game. However, I thought that the gameplay didn't really justify the excitement that the game was trying to portray. At number 25 is Detention. Detention has a great aesthetic to it and definitely is unique in terms of where it comes from and what kind of subject matter it is presenting. However, after the first 2 chapters of the game, the quality of the game dips dramatically to a point where you're just holding the stick in a single direction and not pressing any other buttons, making the game very boring during its latter half. At number 24 on this list, I put Eat Well. Eat Well is cheap and very easy to play and has a very neat concept all around to it. It's basically Pac-Man meets like Binding of Isaac or something like that. However, the health system that is presented within the game is very frustrating to deal with and definitely ups the difficulty within this game. I also think that the translation issues within this game definitely bring it down a peg. But again, this game is cheap. I think it's about like maybe $1 or $2, if that. So definitely give this one a try. It's not too risky to put your investment into it. At number 23 in this list, I put Serious Sam 2. Serious Sam 2 was an interesting game to play for me because I had played all of the previous entries before playing this one, so it was interesting to see like the cartoony style and direction they went in, and some of the new weapons and weapon designs, and some of the new enemies. But I think that the game is also a bit too silly for me, and that the shooting kind of gets a little repetitive after a while, and that story writing and that voice acting, oof. At number 22 in this list is 2 games in 1. That is Kingdom Hearts HD 1.5 and Kingdom Hearts HD 2.5, the remixes. I kind of felt the same between both of these, and if I had to choose between either one, I could have a hard time picking because they're that similar. I do think Kingdom Hearts 2 has a couple more ideas that it does better than Kingdom Hearts 1, but I do think that if I had to choose, I might play Kingdom Hearts 1 first. So I don't know, it's really a toss-up, but these games do offer some pretty good RPG and hack and slash fusions. So if you're looking for something like that with a Disney flair and a Square Enix flair to it, then these 2 Kingdom Hearts games are for you, definitely. And ending off the top 30 is number 21, Mega Man, the original. I like Mega Man a lot. It's very bare bones, yet it comes in and introduces itself and leaves without offering too many problems towards the player. I think that some of the creative ideas later in the franchise do help those games elevate it above this game, but I also like how much of a cohesive package that a Mega Man original is. Alright, now we're on the top 20, and at number 20 is Cosmic Star Heroine. Made by a development group that I've been really excited about throughout the entire year, Zeboyd Games. I was really excited to play their most recent entry here, and I do think Cosmic Star Heroine is very fun. However, I do think that it could have used a bit more character development. Usually Zeboyd introduces some really fun and interesting characters throughout their journeys, so I was hoping that that would be the same case here. There's also the battling mechanics that aren't quite as fleshed out as I would like them to be, but overall it's a solid game, and I do think that it is worth the playthrough. At number 19 on this list is Mega Man 2. Mega Man 2 is really fun and a blast to play through. It's got some really smart level designs and some really fun weapons, as well as some bosses that are really memorable, like the dragon and the alien at the end of the game. I think it definitely lives up to its reputation. I think it does have some problems with like sprite rendering, but I do think that it's worth it. So if you could find this one by itself at really cheap, I would definitely recommend Mega Man 2. At number 18 is another Zeboyd Games game, and that is Breath of Death 7: The Beginning. Their debut title. This game is very cheap and a blast to play through as well. It's got some humor to it, but the most attractive part of this game to me is its very quick and snappy turn-based mechanics. I think a lot of turn-based games could probably take away that very quick pace from Breath of Death and use it in their games, because there are times within the genre itself that the battles do get a little bit long-winded, and so I commend Breath of Death 7 on doing that so well. At number 17 on this list is Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep Final Mix. I loved playing through all 3 of the campaigns, and I also liked how it took the Kingdom Hearts main mechanics and kind of compartmentalized them into these really fun little nuggets of gameplay throughout. I also like how they streamlined the collectibles within the game, especially the journal, which has some great UI design to it. I do think that the story can be a little bit at times, especially with that whole Darth Vader thing with Terra. However, I think that out of all of the Kingdom Hearts games I've played this year, this one is the most sound out of all of them, if that makes any sense. At number 16 on this list is the highest rated Mega Man game, and that is Mega Man 5. I think Mega Man 5 has a lot of very interesting things going on, like the collectible Mega Man pieces throughout the game, the boss design, the change in antagonist, and the very creative ideas that they introduced within these stages. I think there is a lot here that improves upon the Mega Man 2 formula, and I definitely think that I would play this over Mega Man 2 any day. At number 15 on the list is the highest rated Kingdom Hearts game, and that is Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. Chain of Memories is looked upon by the Kingdom Hearts community as one of the worst games on the collection, and I didn't feel that way at all. In fact, I really enjoyed the card strategy mechanics throughout the game, as well as the very kind of roguelike rooms that you would have to traverse in order to get from level to level. I think out of all of the Kingdom Hearts games, Chain of Memories has some of the worst voice deliveries throughout it, and the story can be a little confusing at points, but I think out of all of the Kingdom Hearts games, this one was the most interesting and fun to play throughout them all for me. At number 14 on the list is Metroid Samus Returns. I really like Metroid games, and I've only played 2 similar Metroidvania-esque games throughout the entire year, and I like this one a lot, even though it doesn't really change much from anything prior to some of the previous Metroid games throughout the franchise. I do think it has some interesting bosses, especially that robot boss at the end of the game. But otherwise, this is a very standard meat and potatoes Metroid installment here, so if you're going to pick it up, expect that going into it. And number 13 on this list is a game that I am playing currently, and that is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I think the adventure mode throughout this game is easily one of the most drawing things to it. However, past that, I do think that it's Smash Brothers as usual, and it can get a little boring at times, but overall, it's a very nice installment to the Smash Brothers franchise, and something that you will undoubtedly pick up if you have a Nintendo Switch this holiday season. And number 12 is Dark Souls 3, the Fire Fades edition. This is easily one of the best Dark Souls games out there. I was definitely shocked going back and looking at some footage of the previous Dark Souls games after I had been done playing this one, and there is a lot that they have improved upon over the years, including graphical fidelity, mechanics, and overall level design. Of course, this is not for everyone. This game is very tough, so don't expect an easy time going into it. If you don't like very tough games, then this game will not be fun for you, so keep that in mind. However, for me, it was very fun and a very enjoyable experience. And finally, topping off the top 20 is number 11, Hover, a game that I had been looking forward to throughout the entire year. Hover is like a spiritual successor to the Jet Grind radio games, or the Jet Set radio games, whichever you want to call them. It has some great 3D platforming and a great aesthetic to it. I do think it is a bit derivative from all types of different games, but it is a very fun and very smartly designed romp through this very 3D environment. And I also had fun playing through this with a friend as well, so it also has some great multiplayer functionality to it as well. Alright, finally we are at the top 10 games that I have played this year. At number 10 is Amnesia: The Dark Descent, a very terrifying and dreadful game. This game has some very dank and wet environments with lots of browns and greens and sickly colors. The monsters are very creepy and very present. The player feels very weak throughout the game, and I really think that out of everything that could possibly make Amnesia enjoyable, the thing that most makes Amnesia enjoyable is the tightness of all of the mechanics put together, like the darkness mechanics and the sanity mechanics and the very well put together puzzles. I think that in terms of like packageability, Amnesia has one of the strongest packages that you could play through this year. There isn't much that it really brings it down, except for maybe the aging graphical fidelity that I pointed out within the review. But if you can ignore that, then you are in for one of the most fun and unique scary horror video game experiences that you'll ever play. At number 9 on the list is Final Fantasy VII. This classic JRPG really brought Square into the forefront in terms of RPGs in general, as well as helped them transition into the 3D period of video games in general. And so the graphics within this game might not look as good as they might once did, but I think if there is anything that will draw you to this game, it is Final Fantasy VII's charm. A lot of the models look very cute, as if they are dolls walking across a stage. I also liked a lot of the environments throughout the game, like Midgar or the casino. There are a lot of memorable points throughout the game that will stick with you as you go forth. Final Fantasy VII also features the kind of equivalent to the whole Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father plot twist, with Aerith or Aeris dying within the game. Almost everybody knows about that specific plot point, further cementing Final Fantasy VII's iconic stature within the video games industry. And I definitely agree with a lot of people who love this game and who cherish this game. I think that the game has a lot of charm and isn't as edgy as I think Square Enix thinks it is in the modern day, because a lot within Final Fantasy VII is very fun, it's very accessible, it's very cartoony, and it is very relatable. And number 8 on the list is Guacamelee Super Turbo Championship Edition. This is the other Metroidvania game that I had played this year, and I like the kind of Hispanic Day of the Dead aesthetic that Lunchbox games brought into Guacamelee here. I also like the referential humor, although it could be a bit too much at times, but overall, I think it has some solid platforming, some solid Metroidvania mechanics. This is another hard game, just like Dark Souls 3, so this isn't going to be for everybody, but at the same time, I think that Guacamelee knows who its audience is, what audience they want to attract, and I think that's a very attractive thing within a game. And like Final Fantasy VII, I think Guacamelee has a lot of charm that you will like when you go through this game. And number 7 on the list is probably the safest pick on the list for anybody who is watching, and that is Super Mario Odyssey. Super Mario Odyssey doesn't really do anything new. Instead, it takes all of the mechanics within any 3D platformer and makes one of the best video game packages of all time. The game has some great levels, some great memorable levels, has a fantastic soundtrack that almost rivals, or I wouldn't even say almost, it does rival even some of the most iconic movie soundtracks out there thus far. Mario turning into different objects as a mechanic is extremely fun and satisfying and helps with some of the puzzles throughout some of these open-ended yet boxed off levels that are presented throughout the game. I think that Super Mario Odyssey as a package is perfect. I gave it a 10 out of 10, yet I do think that anybody going into this will know exactly what they're going into when they're buying this game. I think they know exactly what to expect, and I think it is a very safe pick, which is why I put it here. I think that the games that come after Super Mario Odyssey will surprise you a bit more than this one will, and will provide a bit more of, I guess, a unique flair and aesthetic, and they're games that you wouldn't normally pick up, rather than this very big budget, very recognizable and iconic game. But I would still definitely recommend Super Mario Odyssey. It is a lot of fun to go through, and an excellent, excellent addition into the Mario 3D platformer catalog. And number 6 on the list is Nier Automata. Not one of the most philosophical games I've ever played, but there is a lot of philosophy brought to you throughout the game. I also like the game's very interesting style and the way that it introduces some concepts. I do like the final chapter and how satisfying it is to play all 3 other campaigns throughout the game, only for it to kind of boil over into this very insane and chaotic final chapter. It's a very satisfying game to play through. I think that the only thing that really brings this game down for me is the unnecessary RPG mechanics throughout the game. Like, leveling doesn't really do anything because the enemies level up with you as you progress. So therefore, I don't think that levels needed to really be brought forth throughout the game, or at least not within the front end of the game. They could have been within the back end. But in terms of what you get throughout Nier Automata, everything feels very unique with a definite individual touch to it. I like the story, I like the hack and slash mechanics, and I really like the soundtrack as well. The soundtrack is very beautiful and well orchestrated. And number 5 on this list is Yakuza 0. Easily one of the best open world games I've ever played. They make the setting of Kamurocho, which I think is the name, I'm sorry if I butchered it, but they make this setting seem very interesting and lived in. There's a lot to do in this game in terms of going to the arcade, going out on a phone date, on playing a board game, to managing real estate. And attaching it all is this very interesting gangster drama sprinkled out throughout the campaign, as well as some very engaging characters within Kiryu and Majima. Some of the very wacky side quests that you could run into throughout this game is well publicized up to this point, from some memorable characters like Bacchus to the to the pervert that wants to be whipped by the woman to the to the ripoff Michael Jackson in the game. There is a lot to love about this game, and there is a lot to this game as well. It keeps it fresh and interesting as you're going through it, so that the length of the game doesn't really put itself onto your shoulders. You don't really feel bored, because if you ever get bored with one thing, you could go off and do a different thing throughout the entire game. And I really love that within Yakuza 0. And number 4 on the list is Wet Tricks. Made by an independent developer way back in the Nintendo 64 era, Wet Tricks delivers one of the most unique puzzle game experiences I've ever played. And while Wet Tricks doesn't really have much to it in terms of content and what you can do, the actual puzzle game itself is very addictive, and it is very progressive for its time in terms of mechanics. And I think a lot of, say, like Unity developers could use some of those landscape mechanics that they were using within Wet Tricks to maybe deliver something very similar today, because there isn't much games like Wet Tricks that are this unique yet this addictive. I do think that Wet Tricks can get a little busy at times within what it presents to the player. I do think that the graphics do kind of age the game a little bit, and I do think that after a little while the game will get kind of old, but I loved picking this game up and replaying it over and over and over again within little pockets of this year. It's not a hard game to get into. I do recommend that you guys do try to pick this up at some point. I know it's going to be tough with this game being a Nintendo 64 game, and because of that, most of you probably won't own a 64, and thus will probably have to put a little bit of money towards this, but I think it's well worth it. I think Wet Tricks is a very unique video game experience and a very addictive puzzle game. Easily one of the best puzzle games that I've played this year. And here we go. At number 3, the top 3 games that I've played this year. That would be, at number 3, I put Cthulhu Saves the World, again by Zeboyd Games. Cthulhu Saves the World is very hilarious. It has some very memorable characters, a very memorable cast. I think that they took the mechanics within Breath of Death and made them even more fun and accessible and addictive. And I also loved the Lovecraftian settings brought throughout the game. I also love the details that they put into naming certain things and crafting certain enemies. I do think that Cthulhu Saves the World also has a lot of post-game content that will keep you playing it beyond what is just presented throughout the main story of the game. Saves the World has a lot of charm, and it has a lot of replayability. It is also very cheap as well. It's about $3 or $2 usually, plus you get Breath of Death as a added bonus as well. So you have 2 very great, fun, hilarious, and memorable RPGs throughout this package. I think out of all of the Zeboyd games that I have played this year, Cthulhu Saves the World is easily one of the most fun and one of the most memorable that I've played thus far. Definitely the best RPG that I have played this year. At number 2 on this list is God of War 2018. I do think that God of War deserves a lot of the praise that it has gotten thus far, and that a lot of the award that you've been seeing this game get isn't red herrings. It isn't the industry just giving an award to a very known game, but there is a lot of craft and there is a lot of attention to detail within God of War. It introduces one of the most memorable stories that I have played this year with Kratos and his son Atreus. I love that dynamic between them. I also loved characters like Freya and Baldur and the little head guy that would be attached to Kratos throughout the game. The beat-em-up mechanics are very fun. I do think that the that some of the modern mechanics, like the armor and the materials that you would have to either grind or search through, kind of brought the game down a little bit. But God of War definitely has one of the most unique presentations throughout video games by having everything introduced throughout the illusion of one shot. Of course, I'm pretty sure that Santa Monica Studios used some sort of technique to transition between cutscenes and different scenes throughout the game, but that illusion of one shot never breaks throughout the entire game. It never does. And that is very, very, very interesting, very, very unique, and it never brings the player out of the experience that Santa Monica is trying to bring. Definitely pick up God of War 2018. It is definitely worth your time. And here it is. Number 1, the best game that I've played this year. The best game. If there is any game that if you would come to me and ask me, hey Dalton, what game would you most recommend this year? I would definitely tell you to pick up Pool Panic. I'd love to give a great and big shout out to my friend Nicholas Vernacchio for recommending me this game. I was looking for a game to burn through during a vacation, and instead the game I got was one of the most memorable and varied video games I have ever played throughout my entire video games playing history. And I really mean that. I don't mean, that's not an hyperbole at all. Pool Panic delivers moment-to-moment gameplay that feels fresh throughout, with lots of great, fun, and interesting levels, such as just your regular pool table, to trying to pocket balls that are hidden within these Russian dolls that peel layers whenever you hit them, to interrupting a rock concert, to playing a joust competition, to a biking auto running level, to a climbing level, to a weird cake level. There's so many and so much interesting content throughout Pool Panic that makes the game feel so fresh and interesting and unique. I really love how much attention to detail and how much effort was put into Pool Panic. I really mean it when I say that there are some mechanics that are introduced within Pool Panic within one level that are never introduced throughout the rest of the game. Seriously. I also love Angus Dick's very interesting and very colorful and very lively animation. This is one of the most endearing and charming and just accessible, I guess, styles of video game I've ever played. I just love the cartoony style. I also love Grandmaster Gareth's soundtrack. The soundtrack is I've actually grown on it a lot since I had initially listened to it. It has a lot of details and a lot of catchy, memorable tracks to it as well. I would definitely recommend that anybody who watches this video go out to Grandmaster Gareth's Bandcamp and buy the soundtrack. It is easily one of the best soundtracks I have listened to this year. And going back to Pool Panic, the game, Pool Panic by Wreckham is one of the best video games I have played this year. It is extremely fun and unique and interesting, and you will not be bored throughout the entirety of its gameplay. And that concludes the best games that I have played throughout 2018. I definitely recommend that you pick up a majority of these games and play through them yourselves. I think that there is a lot to like within this list and a lot that you could get out of this list. And so that concludes my best of 2018 list video. If you like my videos, you can like, comment, or subscribe. I also have social media links down in the description below, as well as a link to my online portfolio where you can see video game works that I have done. And with that out of the way, have a great rest of 2018.